Okay, we are recording. Well, welcome everyone to Anomalies. My name is Gwen Farrell. I am your host today, and I have with me my buddy Dan Hall. How are you doing, Dan?
Pretty good for an old guy.
Good. Well, we're glad to hear that. We have a fascinating interview to do today, and I'm just going to kind of start us off with a quick bio and interview or information, and then we'll get started. Today our guests are Rhonda and Dwight Hull. Rhonda has been on our Anomalies show before, sharing her interesting mediumship and genealogy work. But today she is joined by her husband, Dwight, who are going to share their extensive knowledge and experiences communicating with spirits and ghosts of the Southwest. Rhonda and Dwight hosted the Haunting in the Desert event in Tucson for 8 years, and they are now hosting the Sierra Vista conference that will be held in May 10, 12 of this year, which we definitely want to get some more information about before we're through today. They have co-authored on 2 books, Speaking with Spirits of the Old Southwest and Conversations with Spirits of the Southwest, that are both available on Amazon. And they are currently working on a 3rd book that's going to talk about their extraterrestrial experiences and adventures. So, Rhonda and Dwight Hull, welcome to Anomalies.
Well, thank you.
Good to
Thank
be
you. Good
here.
to be here.
Yeah, we're really happy to have you with us.
And let
So,
me
Dan,
remind,
would you?
well, I was
You
going to
want
say, let me remind our listeners that if you like what you hear, please like on our YouTube channel and also subscribe so you can get more of these wonderful conversations.
Yeah, great. Thank you. You want to start with questions then, Dan, or you want me to?
Whatever ladies first. How about
Oh,
that?
all right. Okay. Well, I certainly have enough questions, so we can kick off now. In your books, you have talked about that even though you investigate haunted places and spirits and ghosts, you don't really consider yourself to be kind of the typical ghost hunters. Can you explain to us how that's different?
Well, we say that because when we go into a haunted location or any location that we're going to investigate, we like to conduct ourselves like we're walking into someone else's home. We like to introduce ourselves before we walk in. A lot of times we'll actually ask permission. Is it okay if we're here? Is it okay if we talk to you? We like to conduct it as if we're sitting down, having a cup of coffee, and just want to strike up a conversation. So, in that respect, we are very unlike a lot of the ghost shows and typical investigators. Um, we don't use provocation. We don't do anything like that. Like I say, we just go in like we're having a conversation and a cup of coffee. We use very minimal equipment. Generally, what we do use is obviously a voice recorder. We may use some kind of a REM pod or something like that, but only one. We don't like a lot of sounds and stuff like that may distract from the conversation or what have you. And we found this approach to be very unique and very producing a lot of good results.
Very interesting. Do you find that your mediumship skills and experience, do you think that gives you kind of an edge also, perhaps?
I think so. And we're both mediums. He's a psychic medium as well. He also communicates with animals on a telepathic level. So I think it does give us an edge, or any group that has a medium, because you can sense or even communicate with them before you actually start an investigation or the conversation verbally.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Have you ever been into one of those situations where you felt threatened?
No.
I would say the place in Miracle Valley, that
Well,
was the closest.
yeah, that was closest. That was just, I don't know if threatening was really what we felt, more so than just, it was just a
Nauseated.
bad place, just a really bad place, a lot of
Okay.
bad energy.
not
Mhm.
physically nauseated, approaching it.
Mm.
So, yeah.
Well, and so had you known that it was going to be that way before you went there, or was that a surprise?
That big
They
surprise.
didn't know.
Surprise, although, we knew some of the history behind it. So we knew it really didn't have a lot of good stuff happening there, but
Okay.
we didn't really expect this volume of just, it's probably one of the only places that we've been to that I have actually felt that much hate and that much
It's still
just really,
permeating from the
yeah,
other
still
side. Like,
there.
we'll never go back. We have
Oh,
no interest in going back there.
mhm. Do you feel like you were able to do any good by being there, by helping the spirits, or being there at all, or was there just like no way to get through to?
I don't feel like we really did much good. In fact, we actually had, and she could probably tell it better than I can, but we actually had an extremely angry spirit follow us home
Oh
from
my.
that area. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It was not good.
No,
It
it
was,
was not good.
there was a lot of cursing and smudging, to get him out.
Oh, so, yeah, that is something that you sometimes hear about. People, spirits are, following people home. And I wonder, with as many ghost hunters that we hear about or see about on TV, that there isn't actually more of that. But I guess it's a good thing that there isn't, for the
Right,
people who are doing the
right.
work. Yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
yeah.
So, yeah, fascinating. Dan?
Well, I'm going to reflect on my own experience, which is just that, my own experience. I've been part of two ghost hunting groups, one here in Olympia, where I live, and then one in Bellingham. And as I listen to you talk, I'm thinking about those other two groups that I was in. And there was like two components to the group. There was the Rhonda component, so to speak, the medium, the channeler, and then the techies. Now, what you just told me is you kind of combined that, Dwight also being a medium. So, how is that beneficial or not? That you have two mediums and maybe a techie person, but he's also a medium. What would you say to that?
I think it benefits us quite a bit with both Rhonda and I being mediums because what one picks up, the other one may not, so we can kind of keep the conversation going a little smoother. Because sometimes a medium they'll have a drop off where they are in the middle of a conversation and they just kind of drops and they don't get anything. But
Mm,
with us, it's kind of nice because one can kind of pick it up at that point
Or the spirit might want to talk to him
or
as
talk.
opposed to me,
Yeah,
or vice versa.
which we have had. We've been to several old battle sites,
Oh, yeah.
uh, military, skirmish sites. I'm a former combat veteran, so
Hmm.
a lot of times they like to talk to me more so than her. So
mhm.
it comes in handy in that respect too.
Okay, cool.
Good. Yeah.
So one of the questions I always had when I did ghost investigations is why are some places haunted and some not? I mean, everybody dies, so some people manifest themselves as spirits, some don't. And I've always wondered why that is. What do you think?
Um, that's a good question, and I'd like to, when I do shows like this or talk to groups of people, I always like to mention the fact that, when I started this, as far as investigating the stuff,
38 years ago.
38 years ago, almost 40 years ago, I had maybe, 5 or 6 questions that I wanted answered. Almost 40 years later, I find myself still trying to answer those five, and I've got
Yeah,
496 more to go.
I
So,
understand that.
it's just, I don't think this field is a field where you can actually answer questions. Um, but cumulatively, over a lot of investigations, maybe you can get a better sense. Now, to answer your question, I think maybe why some places are haunted and some places are not May just be, the location, and maybe that person liked that location. Maybe that person had a drawing to that location in life, so that's where they are now. It's really difficult to try to ascertain what the reason is, but that's why we continue to do what we do, I guess.
Sure, understood.
Yeah. Have you noticed I'm sure you've done a lot of these, and have you noticed that there seem to be certain types or more of a type? Like, I'm not an expert in this, but I would say I've heard that some spirits stay around because they are just drawn to what they lived, how they lived, their family or the place. Some people stay there because they're a little confused and they don't know where to go. Or maybe there's been some, I don't know if I'd use the term curse, but they're there because something has made them stay there. Can you say that there's more of one kind than another that you've talked to?
What do you think?
I don't, we've had a variety. I mean, a very mixed bag of everything.
Yeah, so we haven't really run into, this kind or that kind mostly.
I think we've run into more that are taught or like have a connection to the area out of love.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's the majority.
Mm-hmm. Okay, good.
Yeah.
Thank you. Mm-hmm.
To Gettysburg for a past birthday here, and we did a show from Gettysburg. And one of the things became obvious during that show is that the person we were talking to, who I don't know that they would say they're a medium, but they're certainly sensitive, that there are places in Gettysburg that have a lot of residual energy that you can't really interact with the spirits. It's just the energy that's there. And then there are places where you can interact with the spirits. Do you find that to be the case too? Residual energy versus some people would call it intelligent hauntings.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Some places that we've been, it's strictly nothing but residual energy. Some places there's a mix, and some places there's just what they call an intelligent haunt. Um, the residual energies are extremely interesting to me, because I still want to know why. Why is this continual loop playing? What's the
Mm-hmm.
significance of this particular scene or this particular action that is happening on basically like a loop, and you cannot communicate with them. They seem like they cannot communicate with us. And as psychics, it's a little frustrating because you can see it, you can feel it, but they're not answering you. Sometimes it's a little, frustrating in that respect. But um, luckily, being both mediums, it doesn't take us long to find out that it's residual.
Mm.
So we can just kind of, stand by and move, or just kind of observe, take note, make notes on the recorder, and then move on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can see that would be very helpful to have partners there with you. I know that Dan has worked on some teams with partners, and I think that probably is helpful too, to have that extra person there to kind of observe what's going on. I'd like to ask you, have you ever been involved in the releasing of a spirit to move on to the spirit realm or to a different place?
Yes, we definitely have.
Yeah, I'll let you tell that story.
Okay.
Yeah, please tell
Uh,
us about that.
okay. We've done it several times. Not very often, but we have done it more than once. But probably the most notable for us and most emotional was during one of our Haunting in the Desert events
In Tombstone.
in Tombstone that we had. Um, it was during a group investigation. We had the entire um, group of people, which is probably about 35 or 40 people in this building with us. It used to be part of
It was a mercantile part of
Uptown, which was a Chinese part of Tombstone. And it was a mercantile back in the day. Um, Today it's a theater that they put on little gunfights inside and such like that. So it does have a kind of a set inside with tables, chairs, a bar, a staircase that goes to nowhere, that kind of a thing. Um, so this was on a Saturday evening, and Ron and I and another gentleman were extremely tired because we had just taken everybody out, into the desert to do a location. We came back, and of course, putting on events is exhausting to begin with. So we just wanted to kind of kick back and really not have a lot of part of it. So we had Brian Cano, who was there with us, um, from Haunted Collector. He was actually kind of running the investigation. He was behind the bar, and he was, trying to get, EVPs, and there was a couple people up there with him while the whole audience basically was watching.
Everybody was around the bar.
Yeah.
So.
And, they kept getting an EVP indicating that there was two people there and one was murdered and he was angry or something like that. So Brian, not really knowing what to do with that, he called
Dan,
the other gentleman up, Dan, who's a pendulum dowser. So he went up first, and he was trying to do the pendulum dowsing, and Dan's like, Dwight, I need you up here. So I go up there trying to direct the session, and we're starting to get some answers. And then I was like, no, we need Rhonda up here too, because I'm just not connecting strong enough. The pendulum's moving, but I'm just not connecting strong enough. Again, a good thing to have two two mediums. So Rhonda came up, and we worked this investigation for about 15 minutes, to the point where we found out that there were two spirits there. One was
they were brothers.
They were brothers, and one was the murder victim, and one was the murderer.
And the murder victim has been coming back to get his brother who killed him to cross over.
Yeah, but the brother apparently felt guilt, and he was afraid of judgment. He was afraid of all this. So it took us probably about 15 minutes, talking back and forth. And meanwhile, while we're talking, Dan is working the pendulum, and we kept telling him, it's okay to go. You can go with your brother. It's fine. You're going to find, the typical peace in the light kind of a thing. And then all of a sudden he went with his brother. And when he did, the pendulum actually snapped down straight and stopped moving, period. It was like it was locked in, and a flood of emotion went through the entire building. Brian Cano was crying. I was crying. She was crying. The whole audience was crying without saying a word. Everybody felt it.
But most everybody, except for us three, nobody knew what had happened.
Right. They weren't real sure. They weren't real sure what just happened. Yeah.
They didn't know why they were emotional, but it was a crazy crossing over.
Yeah. And that was probably the most memorable. And it made us feel good. And it really
Oh, interesting. Yeah, Dan, you probably got some more questions.
I've got more questions. I do answers, unfortunately. Now, tell me if I'm wrong about this. Are or were either of you associated with the LDS Church?
No.
No, okay. For some reason I had that in my mind. Let's see, what else? So what would you say is the most haunted place that you have investigated? And you gave us a pretty good example, but I just wondered if there were others.
Wow, we live very close to Tombstone, Arizona, which that in itself, the whole town is very haunted. The very famous haunt that's usually, featured on all the shows is, of course, the Birdcage Theater. That's one of the most famous ones. But to be honest with you, the entire town
Yeah,
It doesn't matter what building you go into.
it could be on the street.
It could be on the street, which we've had that happen before.
Wow.
There was just so much happening in Tombstone and so much energy that went around Tombstone. It was trapped in Tombstone. That it's just similar to what Dan mentioned was Gettysburg, very similar, that type of an atmosphere.
Mhm.
So the whole town is really haunted. Now we've been all over, and I can't say one is any more haunted than the other, but the activity over a vast area, I would definitely say hands down Tombstone, because like I said, it doesn't matter where you're at in Tombstone,
It doesn't matter time of day,
time of day or anything.
inside, outside. Yeah.
Interesting. Interesting. Yeah, I was reading the second book that you guys have co-authored, and I think the first chapter was about the Buford home.
Oh,
the
yeah.
Buford House, yes.
Yes, and fascinating. And so I read a little bit about that, went through the chapter, but what a place. I mean, it has just been through everything. I wonder, I don't know if you want to talk about that or remember much about it, but can you just tell us a little bit about the Buford House? This is a huge, big thing.
It is. It's most commonly called the most haunted house in Tombstone.
It's original.
Its original home, and it's privately owned now. Although for a while the owners were allowing it to be a B&B, but they do live on site now, or periodically they move. They also have several homes around the area, so they kind of go to different areas. But yeah, it's just an amazing house. I mean, you walk in and you feel really like you just walked back in time. They've kept most everything original, the original floors, the original color within the house. So yeah, you go upstairs and you can just, you can feel it. And not a lot of places can you walk into that's occupied, that you can just walk in and you can feel it. You can feel the history. You can feel, what's happened there.
Mhm.
It's an
We
amazing
actually
place.
got married there.
Yeah, we actually got married
Yes.
there. Yeah,
It's cool. Cool.
which is
Um,
very cool.
yeah, I was reading through that chapter, and it talks about kind of things that have happened there. Apparently, it had a very, very tragic event that took place when the owner, Mr. Buford, was hit by a train. And
Right.
that is kind of what started the whole thing. And then his poor family was trying to sue the railroad company to get some money because
Yeah.
they had nothing. And do you know if they were ever successful in getting any support from the railroad company?
I don't know if what was the wife, the mother, I don't know if she was ever successful. But that was in Los Angeles that he was hit. It was like, I don't believe in curses, but there were 7 children total,
Mhm.
and 3 died within same year
Within the
or a
same
year.
year.
Yeah, and they were like
Wow.
2, 4, and 6 years old. And then yeah, I think there was a 4th child that passed away too later.
After they left, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, but that was a time of diphtheria and cholera and all those
Mhm.
horrible diseases. Um, and then they moved, went through Oregon, settled in Los Angeles, and then he was pulling his cart across the railroad tracks. Now, I think he was partly deaf because he was a mine owner, or he worked in the mines in Tombstone. So that may have had an impact on his hearing. Thus the reason why when he was pulling his cart across the railroad track, he didn't hear the
The
train.
train. Mhm.
But I don't know if she was ever successful in getting any money. Probably.
Well, that would be, that would be good. I also read that I think there were shootings in front of that house, the
Yes.
Buford House in Tucson, out in the street, and geez, crazy stuff.
Yeah,
Yeah.
very crazy. George and Petra.
George
which
and
is right
Petra.
across the street. So
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
That's kind of the the Tombstone love story.
Oh, really?
jilted. Oh yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
You know, Petra and George were in love with each other, and then Petra found somebody else while George was away, working in a mine. So when George came back, he felt jilted.
Shot her like 3 times and then killed himself, but she didn't die.
Yeah, she didn't
So
die.
Oh my
So
gosh.
he ended up marrying and have kids and all that.
yeah, and which
Yeah.
is interesting because she was across the street and down a block a little bit. Um, but later in life, because she did survive, and she spent the rest of her life in Tombstone, which
Right across from the Buford House.
right across from the
Oh
Buford House.
my
So
gosh.
yeah, so she every day she can go out and look at the house. So, but yeah,
Hmm.
that's one of the more famous,
Stories.
stories about
Stories of it.
star-crossed lovers and that
Yeah.
kind of a thing. So yeah,
Yeah. Great. Dan, did you have more questions?
Well, I'm noticing that Rhonda has is that a Travis Walton t-shirt?
It is.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if you have any pull with him, we'd love to have him as a guest. But the question that's coming into my mind is the connection, if there is anything connection between UFOs and extraterrestrials or ghosts. So what do you say about that? Is there some kind of a general theory of the paranormal that you see both of those phenomena fitting into, or they totally separate?
Well, I think personally there is a very real possibility that uh, possible hauntings may not be hauntings. They may be
Right. ET visitations.
interdimensional beings rather than actual spirits.
And
So I think yeah, there could be a connection.
what leads you to that conclusion, Rhonda?
Because allegedly, right, interdimensional beings can travel through dimensions, so they could travel through that dimension. They would be invisible to us, or maybe have an invisibility shield, kind of like we see in the movies.
Mhm.
So it would be easy to think that they were ghosts, when in fact they may not be ghosts.
Hmm.
Yeah.
If you can't see them, but you can hear them, or if they do the same type of activity as a spirit might.
Hmm. I find it interesting sometimes when I go to these paranormal conferences, you've got different camps. You've got the UFO people over here, the ghost people over here, and then the Bigfooters are in the back, and they don't really talk to each other. But I always think, well, maybe they're interrelated somehow. So
I
think
believe
so.
they could be. Yeah, absolutely. Because spirits, we typically think of them kind of popping in. We see them and then they leave, and a lot of experiencers with ETs describe the same thing, where they'll just pop in and you'll see them and then they'll just pop out. So there's shared similarities between both spirits uh, and ETs.
And maybe they're not actually leaving.
Right, they're just getting
mean,
into a different dimension or a
right.
different part.
What is that? Our spectrum of visual is only a
yes,
teeny
Yeah.
part of
Limited.
what's actually going on around us.
Mhm.
yeah.
So who knows?
I think that's really important. When I teach Olympia, a class here for the Olympia Parks and Rec, and that's one of the things I talk about is the visual light spectrum is so narrow that there could be weird stuff going on right next to you, and you might not be able to
Right.
see it.
You wouldn't even
Absolutely,
know. Mhm.
absolutely.
Right. And I've heard from experiencers that I've worked with that when they talk to ETs, when ETs reach out and communicate with them, the ETs tell them, I've been here for a while and I've been trying to reach you, but
Hmm.
the I don't like to use the word frequency because I think that's real. I'm not sure that I really understand that, but what they've told her is that it's easier for them to reach her when she's on a different brainwave level, such as the theta level, which you guys are probably familiar with, which is
Right.
right after you wake up in the morning or
Right.
right before you go to sleep. And that's the level that they have reached her on and they've talked to her on. So I think that makes complete sense to me. If they're from another planet or another dimension, how can we possibly expect them to be like we are?
Exactly.
Mhm.
Exactly. And
So it's
you know,
important to be open-minded. Yeah.
Yes,
know,
absolutely.
Gwen and I interviewed a lady, Rhonda, no, not Rhonda, Angela Smith, who wrote a book called uh, Voices of the Cosmos. And one of the things that that interview impressed upon me is that we as humans are guilty of something called a cultural trance. And what she meant by that is that we see the world through this everyday life that we experience. And that is so far from reality that it's pitiful. So if
That
you'd
is
have
very
a
true.
comment about that, yeah.
hmm Yeah, so
That is
people
very
like
true.
you who are working in these other realms, um, I think it takes a special person, not only because you may be psychic or medium, but because you're open to this and you're not afraid to go there where most people don't want to go. Because that's people, when people do things like you do, it's just to me evidence that there are other things going on around us too. So that's why it's so
Absolutely.
valuable. Yeah, that you do
Absolutely.
that. I have another question I'd like to ask you. And so I know you guys like to hike and you
Oh,
like to
yes.
get out into nature. Rhonda told me that. And so my question is, I might have asked Rhonda about this, but I'm not sure. When you're out, out in the wild, have you ever encountered what we might call nature spirits? Like maybe a Bigfoot or maybe fairies or maybe beings like that that we don't typically think of as ghosts or ETs.
Right. We have not experienced um, the Bigfoot phenomenon, although, we've often talked about, we need to go out because there have been reports here in Arizona of, sightings of Sasquatch. And that's
Mhm.
something because I believe Sasquatch is one of those, um, possibly even an ET or an ethereal being, which probably possesses a lot more intelligence than we do. So I'd really love to be able to, experience that, but we haven't yet.
We got to go to Mount Graham.
Yeah, Mount
I
Graham
keep
may have.
telling you.
But through our hikes and stuff like that, we have not really run into any kind of um, natural, spirit being of that,
Now
an
we have
elemental or
right.
whatever you want to call them.
We have had sort of things happen when
We've
we're
had
out hiking, but we didn't see anything visually. We might have felt something, but we didn't see anything. And to be honest, when you're out in the middle of the desert and you've been out there an hour or two, um, you're kind of doing everything to just do what you came there to do, and make it back to the car in one piece.
There's a reason they call it the desert, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Right, right.
So
But you guys have some forest down there, don't you? Some wooded areas around Sierra
Northern
Vista where
Arizona.
you live?
we do.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah.
yeah. We have mountains right outside our door here,
Mhm.
the Huachucas that are heavily forested. We've got the Whetstone Mountains to our north, which are heavily wooded, and then we've got the whole Coronado National Forest
Right.
just east of us. So yeah, we're pretty much surrounded by some forestation and such like that. So it's you know
And we have been up to what is that fort up in Chiricahuas, over, yeah, by
oh yeah I want to say Fort Graham, but that's not it.
it's in one of the books.
Yeah,
We're,
I don't remember either what it's called.
yeah,
So,
but it's
Rhonda, you
very
just met,
forested there, and that would be a great place for a Bigfoot, to be
Hmm.
if they're down there.
Yeah.
you mentioned Mount Graham. Did I hear that right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So why go there? What might you hope to
Mount
experience there?
Mount Graham is in Graham County. So it's east of us, so it's almost to New Mexico.
Hmm.
And it is the highest mountain in this area, well, east, I guess. But there have been Bigfoot sightings,
Mhm.
several reports up there. There's lakes up there. It's very heavily forested. It goes up to about 10,000 feet. So it
Hmm.
would be a more ideal environment if there is going to be one down here that
Yeah, that's a beautiful area up there. I went through there on the way back from New Mexico, Roswell, way back from
Oh,
Roswell a few
Okay.
years ago, and we stopped, and that's where the telescopes are, right? And the
right.
Yeah.
observatories on top of the mountains.
Right.
That's the
Right.
is that the Vatican's
Yep.
Right.
observatory up there?
It is.
Yeah, it's.
There's
I
there's
think
a
I've
reason.
heard. There's a reason why, yeah. There's a lot of like a spooky talk about what goes on up on Mount Graham, so it is kind of a fun place to go. But if you guys ever make it up there, let us know what you find when you go.
Yeah,
Oh,
It's
yeah.
a
absolutely.
Yeah.
beautiful place to,
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, so I guess I just want to make really one more comment before I ask you about the conference coming up. And that is, before we go on, I want to talk about the books, the two books. The ones that I have been reading is the second one. This is the Conversations with Spirits of the Southwest. And what's one thing that's really cool about this book, and I haven't seen the other one yet, is that they actually have a link in these books that you can go to and you can hear the EVP stuff.
Wow.
This is
Right.
not just something that you read. You can actually go on there and hear their recordings, which I don't know of anybody else who's done that. So that is remarkable. And I highly recommend that to anybody. I can't wait to have a chance to get on those links and hear what you've been talking about. Dan, did you have anything else that you want to ask before we let
Well,
our guests go today?
no, I think we should let them go. We don't want to keep them captive. But I have a question about the EVPs and this link to the EVPs. So one of the things that I struggle with a little bit in doing EVP work is pareidolia.
Right.
The idea that your mind just organizes stuff whether it needs to be organized or not. How did you sort that out for these recordings that you put on your website?
Right. What we did is whenever we do an EVPs, and I usually listen to them first because I've been doing it so long, I can kind of pick out the faint ones a little easier. What we'll do is when I hear something, I'll listen to it a few times so in my head, I know what they're saying. And then I'll go to her and say, hey, I've got an EVP.
He doesn't tell me
I
what
don't
it
tell her
is.
what it is.
Mm.
Okay.
So I'll let her listen to it. And if she comes up with the same thing I
Same
did, or
stuff,
at least
yeah.
very close, then I'm like, okay, it's an EVP. But a lot of times I'll say, well, it sounds like applesauce to me. Well, I think it sounds like, horse trotter, so if it's that different, then we throw it
Yeah.
out. We don't put it on the site.
Yeah,
But if
Okay,
we
good.
come up with the same thing, and a lot of these EVPs that we
they're
got
very clear.
are very clear.
Yeah.
Right.
And we wanted it purposely for that reason. So when people listen to it, especially online, there's no doubt what they're saying. It's a very clear EVP.
Yeah, it's great. Rhonda, do you have the books there? Do you want to? I know you have
I
one
do.
of them there. Yeah, can
So
you give us a look at what they look like? Okay.
this was our first one, but Llewellyn stopped printing, so we did a second edition, which is also available on Amazon. But it is still Speaking with Spirits of the Old Southwest. It just has a different cover.
Okay.
And then this, of course, is the second one, Conversations with Spirit of the Old Southwest.
Mhm.
So
Great. So definitely good to read and different from what you've probably heard from anybody else. So that's terrific. Before we go on, I'd like to ask a couple of questions, and that is, do you have a website or an email address that people can reach out to you?
we don't have a website anymore. It became useless and very expensive. So we have Facebook page. So we have a Believe Paranormal, BEELIEVE Paranormal, B like in the honeybee.
And a B.
Right. On our Facebook page. Also believe paranormal at gmail.com. They can
Okay,
reach
good.
out if they have any questions.
Good, thank you. Please give us a quick overview of the conference that's coming up in May. This is really going to be cool.
So the conference will be Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, May 10th through 12th. Friday is basically just the meet and greet. It is at the hotel. at the Garden Place Suites Hotel in Sierra Vista. So that's a meet and greet from like 6 to 9. And then Saturday and Sunday are your experiencer groups. I think we have you from 8 to 9 in the morning at the
Something
hotel
like
in the
that.
conference room. And then from like 10, I'm sorry, I'm having a hard time thinking about what time it is. 10:30, our speakers start at the community center in Huachuca City, which is 6 miles north. And that goes from about 10 to 5 each day. We'll have a panel at the end of the day with the speakers of that day. It should be really, really fun, informational. We have some great speakers.
Who are you speaking?
So we have Travis Walton. We have Gwen Farrell. We have David Childress from Ancient Aliens.
Oh, yeah.
We have the Navajo Rangers, who are now the
cool,
Paranormal
yeah.
Rangers.
We've had them on.
Stacy
We have
Wright.
Stacy Wright from MUFON.
We have Jennifer Stein.
Jennifer Stein, who did this. She does these t-shirts. She did the documentary on Travis. And we just added somebody, and his name escapes me, but he is friends with Jennifer. He's a anthropologist, I want to say. He's an ancient site person, so he should be fascinating as well.
Yep.
So it'll be 2 packed days of
Two
good
packed
stuff.
days. We only have 5 tickets left. So we've almost sold out. So
yeah, great. So, okay, well, thank you guys. Everybody listening, if you can get down there, it's going to be a really beautiful spot and going to be a lot of fun. Not going to be huge, so you can't talk to the speakers and you can't get to know each other. It'll just be a good size, I think.
Yeah.
oh yeah.
Good.
Yeah, that's
Okay.
what we like about it.
Okay, I think we have one more question. Dan, unless you have something, I'll just close out with our final question here.
I was just going to say to Dwight and Rhonda, thank you for being on our show. Nice to meet you.
Oh, well, thank
Thanks
you.
for having
Great,
us.
great. So, okay, one of the questions that we kind of like to end with here on this show is, when you look all around you in the world, what's going on in your own lives and in technology and everything, how do you feel about humanity moving into the future? Do you think that we're on a good track, or do you think that we're going to not just kind of like stop and start all over again? What do you guys think?
Wow. My personal feeling is, I don't know if we're on a good track. I think we are trying to develop technology too quickly before we even understand it, and for the even, and the proper way to use it. So in that respect, I don't think we're headed in the right direction. What I do see potentially happening is that the whole technology grid and everything, falls away. And then we're forced to, thankfully, actually be humans again and actually talk to our neighbors face to face, actually meet people face to face, not rely on, so much of this technology, which I think at first it's going to seem like a disastrous thing, but I think over a short amount of time, I really believe it's probably for the better, that mankind, the human comes back into mankind again instead of AI, which I think would be better.
Yeah,
Yeah, I
Rhonda,
think
what do you
definitely
think?
I can see us going back to the 50s in technology wise. Not everything else, but just, like very low tech. But I don't see it being disastrous for humankind at all. I think, that maybe that's where we need to go back. Because people, are spending so much time doing this and not enough time actually talking.
Good. Well, thank you very much. It's good to hear an optimistic idea, because it's sometimes it's so difficult for us to be that way, but we really appreciate your optimism on that. Before we go, we kind of like to give a preview of who our upcoming interviews are going to be. And I think we have a couple of them here on Monday, the 11th, which is coming up soon, we are going to have, I guess, what I call like a Buddhism happy hour, where Dan and I are going to sort of talk about the philosophy and the religion of Buddhism. We're not going to try to convert anybody. We're not going to do ritual. But there are so many questions, and there's so much of value in that. And it's a big, big philosophy. So we thought maybe we would just grab a cup of coffee or a glass of wine and sit around on the floor and talk about Buddhism. So anybody who's interested in that, please feel free to join us. And then our next one is on the 13th. Is that Phil Gordon?
Don't stand.
Stan Gordon. Stan Gordon. Okay, yeah, he's a very well-known investigator. Does a lot of work in Pennsylvania, I think. So, so those will be good things
And
that
I,
you're.
I think we have John coming back as soon as he gets over the flu or whatever he had.
Mhm,
John
mhm.
Boudreaux's talking about shamanism and ayahuasca. So, but we haven't rescheduled that yet. So
Interesting. Yeah. So, okay. Well, guys, thank you again.
thank
Rhonda,
you.
thanks for
Bye
coming
bye.
back. And Dwight, good to meet you. And I look
Good to
forward to
meet you.
seeing
Thank
you
you.
down in Sierra Vista in a couple of
Yes.
months. And take care. Okay.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you so
Thanks for
much.
having us. We'll
Bye-bye.
talk to you later.
Okay. You too. Let me cut us off of our recording here. Stop recording. Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye.